Play-by-play Student Sports Network, and the Next Network welcome you to the first episode of Campus Kickoff.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first episode of Campus Kickoff alongside Harris Sideband. I am Michael Mursky, very excited for our brand new weekly college football show. Harris, are you as excited for this season and this show as I am?
I am, Michael. It's been a long couple months without college football. I'm really excited to get back in, and I'm ready for all the upsets and everything that happens in college football tradition to happen just around the corner.
Absolutely. Week 0 already happened, and it didn't even feel like week 0 because of some significant results, which you'll get into. But we are ready for week 1. Real college football is here. Every FBS team in the country is going to play this week. Let's go over the topics that we're going to get to in our show that you will see. We're going to start with taking a look at the rankings. First, the AP Top 25 rankings, and then Harris and I's own preseason Top 10 rankings. After that, we're going to talk about the college football playoff. Harris and I will give our CFP predictions, seeds 1 through 12, and then go over how we think the matchups are going to go. Harris and I also picked a game of the week to talk about in depth for this week, a upset watch game. And then we have another segment towards the end of the show called Off Topic, which Harris and I will talk about something not necessarily happening on the field this week in college football. And that is how the show today will go. So, Harris, you ready to get things going?
I am very ready to get things going, Michael.
All right, let's go to rankings review.
It's time for the guys to review the rankings. Time for our rankings review segment.
All right. Well, Harris, let's kick things off with the AP Top 25 ranking. Some surprises, some not surprises. The reigning champs at 9. The back-to-back champs for the 2 years before, the Georgia Bulldogs, are at the top, with Ohio State 2nd, Oregon 3rd, Texas 4th, Alabama rounding out the top 5, and then the other 20 are on your screen there, with 11 through 25 on the right side. Let's start at the top with Georgia. Do you think this is the appropriate spot to rank them?
I think it's the appropriate spot to rank them if we want to go on how the last few years have gone. They hadn't lost a game in years. They went into Atlanta to play Alabama in the SEC championship, and they lost their first game. And I don't know, I think it was a 23 or 24 almost, or something like that, game win streak. And they didn't make the college football playoff, but I think on paper last year, they 100% had the best team in the country. If they would have made the playoff, they would have ran the table, but they didn't. They lost to Bama in the SEC championship. And I feel like that's their deserving spot at number 1. But I feel like the best team on paper this year is who's sitting at number 2 in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Because all the guys that Ohio State had that could have been 3rd or 4th round draft picks on the defensive side came back. They got the best player in the transfer portal in Caleb Downs. On offense, they brought in a top 15 quarterback in the country. They had an incredible recruiting class, including the number 1 player in the country in Jeremiah Smith. And their best receiver, or second best receiver from last year, Emeka Egbuka, is a top 5 receiver in the country returned. So on paper, I think Ohio State's 100% the best team in the country. But I feel like if we're going on the success Georgia's had, yeah, it's appropriate to have them there.
Yeah, how about, I think it's interesting, Michigan at number 9, the reigning national champions. They lost a lot of talent on the field, and obviously Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL. I mean, they got guys drafted. Their starting quarterback was drafted. Blake Corum, running back leader, was drafted. Bunch of guys from the offensive line were drafted, and the defense is completely new. And it's going to be interesting. Sharon Moore did get a couple games as the head coach when Harbaugh was suspended last year, but it's going to be more interesting to see now how they bounce. I'm not going to say bounce back. They got to the very top. So how they try to keep their success going in 2024.
Yeah, and I mean, Michigan, they have the best player in the country, arguably, on the defensive side, in Will Johnson, but it's what they lost, because not only did they lose guys to the draft, they lost a lot of guys to the portal because they lost their head coach. And to me, the biggest problem with Michigan is like what they're doing on the offensive side of the football. They're starting Alex Orji at quarterback, who in my opinion is the most unpolished starting Division I quarterback in the country. There's been a lot of guys, raw talent, great arm, good legs, stuff like that have played in college football the last few years. Jalen Milroe, Anthony Richardson. There's been a couple of them that have really turned out to be great quarterbacks, but Alex Orji's a guy, when you talk about Jalen Milroe being unpolished going into last year, this guy's way worse than Jalen Milroe was going into last year. And it's just, I feel like they can't have success with him at quarterback. And it's the fact that Michigan's a number 9 team in the country, but I think that's only because they won a national championship last year. I feel like going into the next few weeks, they're going to drop a couple games. I mean, it's the regression from losing the national champ or winning the national championship, losing your head coach. It's just, it's going to happen, and Michigan's not going to be in the top 25 by week 7 or 8, I feel like.
Yeah, how about right in the center there? Another new head coach, a legend being replaced. Your boys down in Tuscaloosa, the Alabama Crimson Tide at 5. Harris, too low, too high? What do we think?
I feel like 5 is a good spot in my top 10. We're going to have them a little higher. I'm going to home down to my boys, but Kalen DeBoer is nothing but, you can even call it an upgrade. I mean, I'm not going to call it an upgrade. Nick Saban's the GOAT, but I'm not going to call it a downgrade. Kalen DeBoer just went to the national championship with Washington. He brought in a lot of his guys, and really, there were a few guys that left, but we restacked on offense. We got Jeremy Bernard, the replacement for Isaiah Bond, who I think could be better than Isaiah Bond this year. And on the defensive side of the ball, they're almost as good as they were last year. They lost Caleb Downs, but you couldn't tell me another guy that we really lost to the portal. We lost guys to the draft, but Kalen DeBoer is ready. He's bringing in the mindset. The let a naysayer know thing from last year, Lank. It's a huge thing, part of the Alabama culture right now, and these boys are ready to roll with Western Kentucky this week.
And as we look across the top 25 and we take a look at the matchups that are happening this week, we got 1 against 14, Georgia versus Clemson on Saturday. You've got LSU at 13 against 23 USC happening on Sunday night, and Texas A&M at 20 against number 7 Notre Dame. We'll get to those games and more later on in the show. Let's highlight before we go to our personal top 10s, Harris, one school here in 11 to 25 that you think is ranked too high, that you think doesn't deserve to be in the top 25?
I'm going to sit here and tell you that 15 Tennessee isn't the 15th best team in the country. And there's better teams in the SEC, in my opinion, on paper that are unranked that are better than Tennessee. People talk about Nico Alonvale being like the Jesus Christ of Tennessee football. Let me tell you this, Nico is not that good. He was a highly rated player out of high school, but obviously he lost a quarterback job to Joe Milton, and Joe Milton is nothing but a below average college football quarterback, at best. And in my opinion, it's just, when you talk about Tennessee football this year, you lost so many guys, and the number one guy you're thinking about is Nico, and Nico just isn't going to impress a lot of people. I feel like Nico is this big dual threat quarterback, and he kind of reminds me of DJ Uiagalelei out of high school. He came into Clemson, didn't play that well, and I feel like Nico's going to kind of go on the same standard that DJ did.
Interesting. I'd still say Clemson's a top 25 team. I think the top 24, maybe in a different order. I definitely, if I would have a full top 25 list, would have it like that. I don't think Iowa should be in the top 25, though. I that's like one that kind of sticks out. I would say teams like Virginia Tech, Louisville was the one that received the most votes outside of the top 25. Virginia Tech was second on the list. I think those schools definitely. I would even throw Iowa State above it. I mean, Iowa is definitely always interesting because you don't know if they're ever going to show up offensively. Right, exactly. It's defense for Iowa, and I am very intrigued by the Hawkeyes. But let's go to our personal top 10s here. And starting with my top 10, and I actually don't have Georgia in my top 2. I agree with you, Harris, about Ohio State being number 1, and I'm going to go with another team in the Big Ten being number 2. And this is not just a prediction. This is not a prediction. This is not my playoff prediction. This is just how I think the top 10 right now in the teams in the country are. And I truly believe that Oregon has the second best team in the country. I am very excited for Oregon in the Big Ten. I know people are saying that some of these Pac-12 schools are not ready for the defense that they're going to find in the Big Ten. I think Oregon is one of those teams that can match up with those physical teams. They honestly don't even have like a terribly difficult schedule for the conference they're in. Ohio State and Oregon do play October, I want to say 12th, and I'm very excited for that game. You got Dylan Gabriel coming in from Oklahoma to Oregon, and I think they're going to be very good. Georgia at 3. I mean, that's like we're going from 1 to this. I still think they're a top 3 team in college football. It's not like I think they're bad. And then you'll see where I have them later in the college football playoff. But Georgia's always going to be at the top. You got to put them there. Notre Dame at 4. I am very high on Notre Dame this year. I'm going to just throw that out there with Riley Leonard at quarterback. I think that the sky's the limit for them. Honestly, I think they might be. They can't be a top 4 seed in the college football playoff because they're not in a conference. But they have a very favorable schedule there at 4. Quinn Ewers and Texas now in the SEC are my the 5th best team, I think, in the country. And then it goes Alabama, Kalen DeBoer. I know if Harris, I think I probably have him lower than you, but that is still higher than a lot of people, I think, would give him in the country. And then you can't put the reigning champs too low. I know that AP had him at 9. I'm going to throw him a little higher up at 7. And then I like Ole Miss. AP had him at 6. I like them, I guess, a little less, but I'm still a fan of Jackson Dart and that offense. Penn State, I have 1 spot under where the AP had him at 9, and then Florida State, already 0-1, I do have at 10, just like the AP had him, but that was before, that poll came out before the Georgia Tech game, but this is my ranking with the Georgia Tech game. I still think they're the top 10 team in the country.
Oh,
yeah,
now we're on to me, I guess. I mean, I said it before. I think on paper, Ohio State is the number 1 team in the country. And I don't really think on paper there's a team that's really close to them. I feel like all the talent they have, especially in my opinion, obviously, I'm a Bama homer, but I'm going to tell you this. Caleb Downs, besides Will Johnson, is the best defensive player in the entire country. You can put him wherever you want on that defensive side of the ball, and he's going to make a play, and he can change your whole defense to revolve around him. Players can play where they need to be because Caleb Downs is on that defensive side of the football, and he's just that much of an impact. He was that much of an impact as a true freshman.
I was watching the other day the Pat McAfee show, and Kirk Herbstreit was on. He was talking about Caleb Downs, what he saw from him at practice as a freshman in Alabama, and he was saying he never saw anybody as a freshman like that since, I think he said Minkah Fitzpatrick, which is like
unbelievable.
That's incredibly high praise. I mean, that was very, very good college football player and NFL player now, one of the best defensive backs in the NFL for a couple of years. And like Caleb Downs is the real deal. I totally agree with you, especially as a defensive back. After Will Johnson, it goes Caleb Downs. But even overall, defensive player, like he's absolutely up there. And he still is going to be on Ohio State for another year after this year.
Yeah, he's got 2 years of college football left, and I feel like that's a guy that could be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year on the defensive side of the football. Anyway, moving on to 2, I got the Bulldogs. I don't really want to talk about UGA, but, Carson Beck is one of the best returning quarterbacks in the country. They got a lot of guys returning as well. Kirby Smart, arguably he is the best coach in the country right now. You can't really put the Dogs lower than 2. I mean, you had them at 3, but you can't really put them at you got to give them their respect. They've done what they've done the last 3 years. Texas at 3. People really don't look at what Texas did in the transfer portal. They have all this money in the NIL. They went out this year and they spent it. They got Isaiah Bond from Alabama. They got Amari Niblack from Alabama. Those are 2 guys, 2 huge offensive weapons to put with Quinn Ewers. I feel like that might be a top 3 offense in the entire country, if not even higher than that. Maybe Oregon or Arizona, teams you could call the best offense, or Ohio State at some points. But no, I feel like on paper, Texas might have the best offense in the entire country. And that's why I have them at 3. 4, I'm going to roll with the boys in Tuscaloosa, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I feel like they're a very balanced team. A lot of the teams, great offense, not the best defense. Great defense, not a great offense. Very well-rounded all around. I feel like Kalen DeBoer is ready for these boys to go. 5, Oregon. I have Oregon lower than a lot of people because I don't think Dylan Gabriel is as good as a lot of people think he is. I feel like he's a favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, but I feel like, to me, he's like the 5th, maybe 6th best quarterback in the entire country. I don't feel like he's top 3 like a lot of people think he is. He wasn't that great at Oklahoma, and he went to Oregon, and I don't know. He doesn't really like pass the eye test for me. I feel like there's a guy on their bench, Dante Moore, that like could be a better Oregon quarterback than Dylan Gabriel is when Gabriel leaves. 6, Ole Miss. I love Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, great offensive coach right there. That offense is going to be great. I feel like this is the year that Ole Miss brings the pieces together to beat big SEC teams that Lane Kiffin hasn't been able to do the last few years. 7, Missouri. Horrible defense, but that offense is so good. They got in my opinion, the best receiver in the country in Luther Burden. Then they have Brady Cook throwing the football, and they have 2 Sunbelt running backs coming to their team, Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel, who are both top 10 running backs in the country coming out of the group of 5. 8, Notre Dame. Michael, you had Notre Dame at 4. I think Notre Dame, I agree, the sky is the limit because of their schedule, but I feel like they could drop week 1 very easily, and they're underdogs in week 1 versus Texas A&M. And I feel like that's the only reason I have them this low is because I feel like they are going to lose that football game. I love Riley Leonard. I think he's a very polished quarterback, but I feel like they drop week 1, but then win out. So I feel like they're going to be 11-1, but they're going to drop a game, and it's going to be that week 1 versus Texas A&M. And a lot of people are going to hate on them, and I'm going to put them here now because I know
we'll talk about that game later, definitely.
Yeah, I know they're going to lose that football game. I'm telling you that right now. They are going to lose. So I'm going to have them down here before I catch any slack for it. 9, Penn State. I feel like Drew Aller is going to surprise a ton of people. Last year, a little underwhelming what a lot of people thought he was going to be. But great quarterback there. Team all around is really good. The defense is great. I love Penn State. And Arizona, they lost their head coach last year. They brought in Brett Brennan from San Jose State to be their head coach, but they have the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the country in Noah Fifita and Tate McMillan. So that's my top 10. I feel like a lot of people are going to tell you, oh, Arizona, Arizona's defense sucks. They lost a lot of guys to Washington. But Arizona's high-powered offense in that Big 12 conference this year is going to be, like, unbelievable. And that's why I have them at 10.
There you go. All right. Just because they're in the top 10 doesn't mean they're in the top 12. And I do have some discrepancies on my list, even though I might like a team that goes in over another. Let's go over our college football playoff predictions. I'll just go through it 1 through 12 in order. At 1, I have Georgia. I think they're winning the SEC championship. I think they end up beating Texas. I think Texas and Alabama have the same record. And I think I went through like every single game of the season. I actually picked Bama to beat Georgia, so it had to have been later in the season where they stumbled and lost a game or two to get them down to 10. We'll get to them soon. Ohio State, I said before, I'll say it again. I think they're the best team in the country. I do think they're going to lose to Oregon, though, in the regular season and then beat them in the Big Ten championship to get the 2 seed. Arizona in the Big 12. I don't see it too often. Harris will get to your playoff soon, but I have not seen this pick really at all. I think it's everybody's picking Utah. I mean, like I've seen Oklahoma State in some people's top 10. Like, I think Arizona is one of those teams that really can make a big run. And then winning the ACC, another team, everyone's talking about Florida State. Everyone's talking about Miami, Clemson. How about NC State, the Wolfpack? I've seen people pick Virginia Tech. NC State, I seriously think is the best team in this conference. And I actually think they're the only team in the conference that is going to make the college football playoff. I originally did have Florida State, and maybe you could say I'm cheating because the season already started, but I had them, and then once I put in that the loss, the rest of the picks that I ended up making, the way it fell through was that it was Miami and NC State in the ACC championship, even though Florida State had the second best record, but because Georgia Tech was a conference game week 0, they lost that, so they didn't even end up making the ACC championship, which does not mean you can't make the college football playoff. It just means they didn't make the ACC championship, which then I had NC State beating Miami in the ACC championship. And not only did Florida State not make the top 4, Florida State ended up with this one loss falling out completely. So I know people are saying, like, they can rebound from this. They can rebound from this. If they win the rest of the games this season, they will make the college football playoff. They will be ACC champions. But 1 or 2 more losses is something they can't afford in a very competitive ACC. And I have the Wolfpack with Grayson McCall. I'm a big fan of them this year, and I have them as the 4 seed. At 5, and I'm going to say this right now, Harris, we're going to talk about the game this week. I'm going to disagree with you on what you said about Notre Dame and A&M. I think Notre Dame, they will be the second best team this year in college football. I think Ohio State will be number 1, but because with how the records play out, they end up getting the 2 seed. I think Notre Dame will be the best team after that. If Notre Dame, I think it'd go undefeated, 1 loss. I think they're a very strong team, but they can't be a top 4 seed because they're not a conference champion, so they're the first one out. And then the best team in a conference that's not a conference champion, who's my second best team in the entire country, is Oregon. Second best team gets the 6th seed, very possible in the way the playoffs work this season. And I think Oregon get a rematch, the Fiesta Bowl rematch, which I'll get to in a minute. And then At 7, I have Drew Aller and the Penn State Nittany Lions, which are the third Big Ten team, the third and final Big Ten team represented in this playoff prediction. At 8, how about the Kansas Jayhawks? No one's talking about them. They might have the easiest schedule of any Power 4 team in the country, and they have a good team. Like you go down the list, and they don't end up playing these powerhouses. Like I don't think they play Utah. I could pull it up here, but they play. Obviously, they play Kansas State, but besides for that, they start with Illinois. Or sorry, they start with Lindenwood, I guess, tomorrow. But then nobody on their schedule is even remotely difficult besides for Kansas State. And then I guess if you like Deion Sanders in Colorado, then Colorado. Kansas State's the only ranked team they play. And I think it's going to stay that way unless Colorado ends up playing to their full potential, which we all know they won't. And yeah, Kansas has like a really easy schedule. No one's talking about them. So I got Kansas sneaking in here as the 8th seed in the playoff. And then I got Texas from the SEC, the SEC championship game losers at 9. Which means they will go to Kansas. At 10, I have Alabama, which I think will have a better season than Texas and just as good of a season as Georgia. But again, with just how the seeding ends up working out, they get the 10th seed. And then the group of 5 team I don't have as the 12. I have them as the 11, and that is the Liberty Flames. I am super high on the Liberty Flames. And if they get a draw like this, it'll be unfortunate because they would have a really good season to get to this point. It was very close between Liberty and Boise State for me, but I did end up going with Liberty there. And then I have Mizzou at 12, as Harris mentioned. Luther Burden, Brady Cook, that is the second best quarterback receiver duo after Fafita and McMillan at Arizona. And I think their offense is going to take them into the playoffs. And then we'll go over our predictions after Harris gives his top 12. Then we'll go back to my bracket.
Yeah, so I said earlier, Ohio State's the best team in the country on paper by a mile. Number 2, I got my boys. I got Alabama winning the SEC. I feel like Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship after they face them for the second time the whole season. I feel like they're going to play twice. They play once in Tuscaloosa, Bama wins that game. They go into Atlanta, play them in the SEC championship, win that game as well. 3, NC State. Michael, me and you, a lot of people don't have NC State. They're kind of flying under the radar because a lot of people, they might think that Clemson or FSU or something like that's going to win the ACC. But in my opinion, it's NC State because Grayson McCalla transferred from Coastal Carolina. Is one of the best he was one of the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal. And then they have a receiver, a guy by the name Kevin Concepcion, who was the best freshman in the country last year and is one of the best receivers going to this college football season. No one is higher on Casey Concepcion than I am. I'll tell you that right now. For Arizona, I talked about it earlier. Super great offense, not the best defense, but they're going to reload this year. And I have huge faith in them to win that Big 12 with the offense. 5, Texas. I feel like Texas doesn't make the SEC championship game. They're going to be high enough ranked. The loser of the SEC championship game falls below them. 6, Oregon. I talked about it. I feel like they're going to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. I agree with that. And they're just going to lose. They're going to fall to 6. 7, Notre Dame. I feel like what I said earlier. They're going to lose game 1. They're going to win out 11-1. Claim that 17. 8, Georgia, the loser of the SEC championship game. I feel like since they're already going to have a loss to Alabama, they're already going to be ranked 4 or 5 going into that game. Maybe 3, and they fall a couple of spots back. 8, 9, Clemson. They play Georgia this weekend. I think they're going to lose that game, but I feel like they have a really good chance to either win out or come close to winning out and have a high rank at the end of the year. I think Kate Klubnik's going to take a huge step up this year. 10, Utah. They're kind of in a weird spot. Their quarterback didn't play at all last year, but I feel like they're still going to have a pretty solid season. They have a great team on paper, and they're going to win a lot of football games this year. 11, Ole Miss. I feel like, I'm a homer. The SEC, Michael, what does the SEC mean? What does it mean, Michael? Tell me for it.
What is the Southeastern Conference?
Yeah, but what does it mean?
I mean, it's the best conference in the country.
No. You're supposed to say it just means more because it does just mean more.
It just means more.
Yeah, it just means more. So I've got Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Ole Miss all in my college football playoff because I feel like the SEC is just that good of a conference to the point where they can have 4 teams and no one's going to look the other way. Jackson Dart, all the guys they got in the transfer portal, Lane Kiffin, like this team is great on paper. They have a chance to make, a huge run. Now at 12, my group of 5 team, the Appalachian State Mountaineers out of Boone, North Carolina. No one in the world is higher on App State than I am because they have a quarterback by the name Joey Aguilar, who is a top 10 quarterback in the country, led the Sun Belt in passing touchdowns last year, came in as a JUCO transfer last year, wasn't the starter in the first game. The starter, Ryan Berger, now the backup quarterback at Liberty, broke his finger. And on Joey Aguilar's first play as a FBS player, touchdown. And after that, the sky was the limit. They got Caden Robinson as a receiver. They got Kanye Roberts at running back. This team is the best group of 5 team in the country. They've got the 4th or 5th best odds to go to the playoff, but I'm telling you, App State is going to win the Sun Belt and be the highest ranked group of 5 team in the country. And that's my top 12 in college football playoff.
All right. We'll go back to my bracket here and we'll get my predictions. Let me see. I'm trying to see where I had App State. I had App State finishing. I didn't even have him finishing first in the Sun Belt. I think I had Texas State, or Coastal Carolina. Texas State. I think JMU also has a good chance. That's a tough conference. I don't think the group of 5 team in the playoff is coming out of the Sun Belt. But I want to say, here, let's go over I'll just go. Yeah, the first teams I had out of the top 12 were Ole Miss in the SEC rather. Definitely I was considering Boise State out of the group of 5. Memphis also was right behind them. Clemson in the ACC. I had actually Miami, Virginia Tech, and Clemson all with the same record. And then I had Kansas State, Utah, and Oklahoma State all 8-4 out of the Big 12. And then my 2 bet at 9-3 in the Big 10, which would be after Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State ranked 4th and 5th in the conference, were Michigan and Maryland. Call me a homer on UMD. I don't care. I had Maryland ahead of USC, Washington, Wisconsin. I think Maryland's getting 9 wins, but they're not going to make the college football playoff, but I like their schedule a lot. Anyway, let's go over these matchups that we have, starting with 12-5, Notre Dame, Missouri. It's in South Bend. It's going to be Notre Dame. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Mizzou's offensive run is going to end here because Notre Dame can score and stop, which is very important. Rematch of last year's Fiesta Bowl without Bo Nix, and I think Dylan Gabriel is very good, but he's not the best quarterback in this matchup. I think Caden Salter might be a top 5 quarterback in the country at Liberty. I'm a big fan of Salter, who is considering transferring. Harris, remember that?
Yeah,
he came back. He entered the transfer portal.
He entered the transfer portal and came back to Liberty. Yeah.
You know why he came back? Because they had a mission, and the Flames will light up college football, but unfortunately lose to Oregon in the first round of the college football playoff. And then Alabama goes into Happy Valley and beats Penn State on the road, which will be a crazy game. And if they make that a night game, a playoff night game, Alabama, Penn State would be absolutely electric. Like that might be the best atmosphere in the history of atmospheres. If we thought the neutral site Rose Bowl Alabama-Michigan game was good, the Penn State fans, if this would be a matchup, if they would host, because remember, first round is not a neutral site in the playoffs. Like first round is at the higher seeds home stadium. Alabama will have to play perfectly, as in the best game they would have to play the whole year to beat Penn State on the road in the playoff, and I think they will. And then I have Texas beating Kansas in Kansas as the 9-8 matchup. Kansas is not the 8th best team in the country, and they won't be the 8th best team in the playoff. But they will be the committee will look at they will dominate. Like Kansas will be really good, and the committee will look at that, and they will put them at 8. and Texas with their SEC loss will go at 9. Even if it's 8-9, Texas, Kansas, I think those are interchangeable at the spots. Then either way, Texas is going to win that game. And then we can go Harris. We can go then your first round, and then we'll go my second round, and then we'll go
So I got Notre Dame beating Utah. I think Riley Leonard, by this point, has proven himself to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They're on a huge winning streak. They win that game. 8-9, a rematch of week 1 coming up this week. I feel like Georgia wins that game pretty easily. I feel like they're going to beat them this week pretty badly. I feel like they beat them there pretty badly. 6-11, Oregon versus Ole Miss. This is a huge toss-up for me. But what did I say earlier? The SEC just means more. Give me the Rebels against Oregon. And then 5 versus 12, App State versus Texas. As much as I would love to pick App State in this scenario, I do think App State has a chance to beat Clemson in week 2 on September 7th in Death Valley, but they don't have a chance to beat Texas. Texas wins that game. So that's my first round. I got Texas, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Notre Dame coming out of it.
All right, back here. And this part I actually am going to predict on the spot because I mixed up how the seeding is going to work, but it's going to be Georgia playing Texas, Arizona playing Oregon, Ohio State playing Alabama, and NC State playing Notre Dame. Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State, Alabama, I'm telling you right now, will be the 2 best games of the playoffs in this scenario, or at least up there for sure. Like, this college football season has the potential to be really good, and then the playoffs have the potential to be great. And if they fall out like this, they will be great. But Notre Dame's going to beat NC State. Oregon is going to beat Arizona as a lower seed, but these are all neutral site games at this point. Ohio State, Alabama will be very close. I'm going to go with Ohio State. And then Georgia and Texas, I don't even have a pick for. Like that before the show, I realized they'd be playing each other in this scenario. And it's a complete toss-up. Like, honestly, this game could go either way. And you know what I'm going to do? Because I know the result. Well, I know. I'm just going to flip a coin for my prediction here. Georgia will be heads to the higher seed. I'm going on Google. Flip a coin. Texas is tails. It is heads. Georgia beats Texas. So I'm going to have Georgia playing Notre Dame and Oregon playing Ohio State for the 3rd time this season.
All right, so round 2, we're going to have Arizona going up against Texas, which I think Texas wins that game pretty easily. Now, I got to match this up here. We're going to have Ohio State playing Georgia, a rematch of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl 2 years ago where Ohio State missed the game-winning kick. This time, I'm taking the Buckeyes to beat Georgia. All right, now I got to see this. 11 versus 6 would be Ole Miss playing NC State. So Ole Miss, NC State. Yeah. So Ole Miss, NC State. That's a huge toss-up for me, but as I said earlier, it just means more. The Rebels are going to make a huge run this playoff. I'm taking the Rebels to beat Grayson McCall and NC State. And to round it out, Alabama to play Notre Dame. Who are we taking here? We're taking the Alabama Crimson Tide. So my Final 4, which would have been a college football playoff the last couple of years, is Alabama, Ole Miss, Ohio State, and Texas. That's 3 SEC teams.
All right. The 2 best teams in the country play in the semifinal, Ohio State and Oregon. My top 2 ranked teams. This is where they will rule it out for who is going to be the best. I think Ohio State's winning the regular. I think Oregon is winning the regular season matchup on October 12th. I think Ohio State is winning the Big Ten championship in December. And in the college football playoff semifinal, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they end up winning the final 2. Notre Dame versus Georgia. Georgia should win this. They really should. But they won't. Give me Notre Dame to go to the college football playoff final this year against Ohio State. Harris.
All right, so I've got one. So it would be Ohio State playing my lowest ranked team, correct? So we're going to have Ohio State playing Ole Miss, which I'm going to have Ohio State winning that game. For sure, I feel like Ohio State on paper is the best team in the country. And then I'd have Alabama playing Texas, a rematch of what happened in Tuscaloosa last year. And let me tell you, I was at that game. I've never felt a more depressing crowd in my life. Texas came on the road and beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa in one of the biggest games and biggest environments in college football history, in Tuscaloosa history, in history of Alabama football. And they came on the road and they made Jalen Milroe look like one of the worst quarterbacks in the country. But this is a revenge. Texas now is in the SEC. They're not used to this. Alabama wins that game, advances to the national championship to play Ohio State.
I want to point this out now. If Texas beats Georgia, remember we flipped the coin, but if Texas beats Georgia, if that would have landed on tails, I would have had them beat Notre Dame. And then this would have been Ohio State, Texas. This would have been the Quinn Ewers. Wait, Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State.
Ohio
right?
State.
No. Yeah, he was at Ohio State.
This
would have been the Quinn Ewers final game. Okay, that wasn't. But I do have Georgia winning, which means then I have Notre Dame beating them. So this is between Ohio State and Notre Dame, which was the season opener for it was week 1 a couple years ago. I think 2 years ago. I remember because we called that game. And last year, Ohio State and Notre Dame played, and we called that too. And that was a crazy game. Remember that came down to like the 1 yard line. That was when Lou Holtz called out Ryan Day and then Kyle McCord, and they went on the road in South Bend, and then they got it done with I can't remember the running back, number 19 it was, but
for who?
Not the point. Ohio State got it done at the very end. But the point is, this should be a fun college football playoff final game between Ohio State and Notre Dame, 2 big, historic college football programs, and I am taking the Buckeyes to win it all.
So we got Alabama playing Ohio State. In my opinion, the 1 and 2 going into the college football playoff, the 2 winners of the 2 best conferences in the country. Who's going to come out on top? As much as I hate to say it, I can't pick, I'm not going to be at home here, and I'm not going to take Bama because on paper, Ohio State needs to win. They need to win a national championship this year because if they don't, Ryan Day's on the out. Ohio State right now has the best roster they've had in years. They have to win this game. Otherwise, Ryan Day's going to have way too many haters going into the next season. Therefore, I'm going to take the Buckeyes to beat the Alabama Crimson Tide in the national championship game, as much as it hurts my heart to say it.
85 yards through the heart of the South. That's the last time they played in the playoffs back in 2015. Ezekiel Elliott in the semifinal game.
We don't need to remind me. There's been 2 times and there's been 3 times in my life, in my 18 years on this planet, where I've been really, my heart's pumping in those games. Ohio State, Alabama, when I was 9 years old, okay? Ohio State, Alabama, when I was 9 years old, was the first time I really felt it going. The second time I felt it going, Texas versus Alabama with Bryce Young in Austin, Texas, when Bryce Young led the game-winning drive to beat them. That game was nuts. Actually, there's more than I could think of, but these are the 3 that came off the top of my head. And lastly, I think we all know what it is. It's 4th and 31 last year. Jalen Milroe, Isaiah Bond on the last play, one of the last plays of the game to seal the deal against Auburn. That game was unreal. I think I was on the ground dead for a couple seconds and came back and was realive. Those are some lies to the Alabama football fans, but my first time really feeling it was against Ohio State in the 85 yards through the heart of the South.
By the way, I hope you know, because we called that game 2 seasons ago, the Texas game. And I hope you know that had Quinn Ewers not gotten hurt in that game, Texas would have won by
relax,
two
relax.
plus possessions.
No,
yes.
we would not have.
Hudson Card, if Hudson Card was not the quarterback for the final, 2.5 quarters, right? Didn't he get hurt in like the second quarter? Then Texas would have. I can't think about it like that because Texas was the better team until Quinn Ewers got the significantly better team.
No, you can't think about it like that because Alabama won the football game.
Yeah,
the other 2 times I really felt it.
Wasn't it like 19-18? It was like
relax. But the other 2 times, Michael, I really felt it as an Alabama football fan. Was Tennessee and LSU in 2022. Those 2 games were 2 heartbreaking games, but man, was I going nuts.
I called that's maybe the best game, the best college football game I ever called was the Tennessee game. That was really
Bama
fun.
should have won the Tennessee game by 14 points. We can get into that on another day.
Yes. Speaking of games that I'm calling, the first game of the year that Josh Berman and I are going to be calling on Twitch, on the next network Twitch, is my game of the week for this week, which is our next segment. So that's a good segue here, producer.
It's time to look at the games of the week for Michael and Harris.
Thank you. My game of the week this week is Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. Boy, am I pumped for this game. I've been looking forward to this game since they announced that this was the primetime game back in, I think it was like April or May. Like, I knew because this was Mike Elko and Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard leading the charge for Notre Dame as a quarterback, and this is now the Mike Elko era as the head coach of Texas A&M. And if this would be at Notre Dame, I do not think A&M would be favorite, let alone anybody pick them. But because it is in one of the loudest, maybe the loudest environment in the country, and with one of the best fan bases in the country, and it's in College Station, and it's a very hard place to play, and it's week 1, and it's the season opener, and it's a 7:30 ABC game, and the whole country is going to be watching. This is a complete toss-up, and I am super pumped to call this game as the first one of the year. It is, like, again, one I've been looking forward to for a while. We're also doing USC LSU Sunday night, Josh and I. But this game will be very fun, and I think it could be anyone's game. Harris, you mentioned this earlier. A&M is favorite, but I think Notre Dame should get it done on the road. But it'll be very interesting because A&M is also one of those teams, like, we didn't talk about them, but they have a chance to win 9-10 games, which could be enough in the SEC to make the playoffs.
I want to say something about this game where you know, a lot of things come into play is home field advantage in college football is literally everything. Texas A&M is probably the hardest stadium to play in the entire country because they are the loudest fan base in the country. And when you're traveling on the road to play Texas A&M with a great quarterback and you're facing your former head coach, knows how you play, you're going to be underdogs. And that's what Notre Dame is. They're underdogs on the road. And they should be underdogs on the road because they're going to lose the football game because the SEC football is just a different level. It's a different breed, especially when it's a game like this of this caliber. And I can't explain to you how crazy the 12th man is there out in Aggie land. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. Notre Dame's just going to drop this game. And I know we're going to bicker about this for, you know, until we see who's right on Saturday. But I can confidently say right now that if I was a betting man, I'd be taking Texas A&M.
I cannot wait for this game. 7:30, we'll have it for you on the next network, and on TV, it'll be on ABC. Harris, how about your game of the week?
Well, my game of the week is something that a lot of people wouldn't put as their game of the week. We're going the Battle of Florida, Miami versus the Florida Gators. The Gators are probably the most hated team in the country right now. Billy Napier, if he doesn't succeed this year, he's on the outs. He's fired. You know, they haven't had a great time hiring football coaches over the last couple of years. They had Jim McElwain. Now they have Billy Napier. They should never have fired Dan Mullen. And on the other side of the football, you know, you got Miami, who has Mario Cristobal, who everyone, you know, has problems with because he really hasn't shown what everyone thought he was going into Miami. And this is a game where it could really go both ways. I personally think the Gators are going to win this football game. It's in the swamp, okay, which again is another hard environment to play in college football, and the SEC environment is. And the Gators have a quarterback, Graham Mertz.
Most SEC environments are.
Yeah. And Graham Mertz,
Vanderbilt brings that list way down.
Oh, okay. But Graham Mertz was horrible at Wisconsin. Awful. But he came into the Gators last year and had a great season. And sure, they lost a couple guys. They lost Trevor Etienne. They lost Ricky Pearsall. But, you know, they have a guy, Trey Wilson, on the offensive side of the football, wide receiver, who's great. And they got Graham Mertz in that, you know, against a Miami team with a weak defense. But you know who Miami has? They have Cam Ward, who really scares me when I look at this game and when I'm picking the Gators to beat Miami. Because Cam Ward, other than Jalen Milroe, is probably the most versatile quarterback in the entire country. He can do it through the arms. He can do it on the legs. You know, he's everywhere. And this is a guy that 2 years ago was a D2 player. He played at Incarnate Ward. Then he transfers to Washington State, takes the whole country by storm, enters the NFL draft, but then transfers to Miami instead. And, Miami, they have something to do this year. They want to win football games. They don't want to hear the narrative that Miami football isn't back, but they're not back because the Gators are going to beat them. And the Gators, their over-under total for this season is 4.5 wins, okay, which is towards the bottom of the SEC. But I'm going to call this here right now on week 1 of this show that the Gators start 5-0.
Wow.
And I'm taking the Gators to beat Miami.
And I disagree with you. I do not think the Gators are beating Miami, and it is primarily because of Cam Ward, who Cam Ward, I agree with you that he is probably the best, most versatile, best dual threat quarterback after Milroe. I mean, he's like right up there with Milroe. It's not like it's
right.
A huge gap there. But I would throw like a game like Clemson, Georgia, or even USC LSU Sunday night in Vegas as another game that's a possible game of the week. I never really thought of this as like game. This will be an upset if Florida wins, I would say.
Right.
No?
It would be. They're 2.5-point underdogs, and I really thought you were going to go with Georgia Clemson. We were picking these games of the week, so I went with the game that I'm really invested into watching because I really do think the Gators are going to surprise a lot of people this season. But you talked about that LSU USC game. USC is going to win that football game as well. I'll tell you that. USC's winning that football game because that's one.
I think LSU's winning that game.
See, we're going to see on Sunday who's the real sharp here because Sunday night we're going to see.
Yeah.
Because Garrett Nussmeier sucks. I'm sorry. His dad can have, a great coaching name, a great quarterback coaching name. He can come from this quarterback family, this, that, and the other. But Miller Moss for USC, I know I've said I'm a fan of a lot of guys. And I'm a huge fan of Miller Moss of USC. So USC, their defense might suck, but they're going to, in Vegas, they're going to beat LSU. The Gators are going to beat Miami, and Texas A&M is going to beat Notre Dame.
I would like to point out that ABC has 4 games this week. Clemson, Georgia, noon Saturday. Miami, Florida, 3:30 Saturday. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, 7:30 Saturday. And USC, LSU, 7:30 Sunday. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit are going to call the Notre Dame game. But why would you want to watch Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit if you can watch Michael Mursky and Josh Bourbon? And then Kirk Herbstreit, Reese Davis are doing the USC, LSU game while Chris Fowler is off calling women's tennis in New York. But that's not the point. Anyway, that is our game of the week for this week.
Now we find out who should be on upset watch this week.
All right, I have 2 games I'm going to give you here. The main one and the one we got on this graphic is Old Dominion against South Carolina. South Carolina, I think, is one of the most overrated teams in the SEC. I don't think they're going to do very well. They're minus 21 in this game, and not only do I think Old Dominion is going to cover, I think Old Dominion can make it very close and very possibly win this game. I think this is one nobody's talking about, and I think that South Carolina might get him. Old Dominion might get him. South Carolina paid $1.5 million to Old Dominion for this game, and it might not go their way. I'll just say that. Old Dominion, by the way, has a very hard schedule. They could be a good team, but nobody will know because they play like a lot of good teams. And then the other game that I do think is actually going to be a straight up upset that actually nobody's talking about, to the point where this is not even a nationally televised game. This is an ESPN Plus game. Minus 26.5 point spread. I think Tarleton State is going into Waco and beating Baylor this week. That's what I'm throwing that out there right now. Give me Tarleton State over Baylor. 1-0 Tarleton State, by the way. They beat McNeese 26-23 last week. So I'm going to go Tarleton State first in the UAC to beat Baylor.
I love that ODU pick, Michael, because we talked about App State earlier, right? When I watched a ton of App State football last year, right? This Old Dominion team played App State. App State was winning by a ton. Old Dominion came back and beat them at the end of the game, and I was shocked. And I'm saying that Old Dominion is a pretty solid football program. So I like it. Are they going to beat South Carolina? No, but I like the take.
What about the other one? Tarleton State over Baylor.
I mean, I don't know what we're on right now, but we'll see on ESPN Plus when Baylor takes care of Tarleton State.
Okay.
My upset watch of the week, Penn State versus West Virginia. Now, do I think Penn State loses this football game? Maybe. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to pick West Virginia. I think Penn State is definitely on the upset watch this week. They're traveling into Morgantown. They're 8.5-point favorites. They're going against Garrett Green in West Virginia, who won 5 of their last 6. They're angry. They won 5 of their last 6 games. No one's talking about them. They won the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and now they're 8.5-point underdogs against Penn State. Why are they 8.5-point underdogs? I'm not sure. I feel like this game should more be 3.5, 4.5 when it's in Morgantown. If it was if it was at Penn State, I'm talking more of a 12, 13-point spread. But right now, maybe not even, maybe 5. 5 points, probably like 8.5 if it was in Penn State. The fact is an 8.5-point spread in Morgantown. I love West Virginia to cover this game, and I feel like they do have a chance to win. Garrett Green's a great quarterback. This team's ready to go, ready to roll, and ready to beat Penn State.
And remember, this was a season opening game last year in Happy Valley, 38-15. The Nittany Lions got the better of the Mountaineers, but Harris says it might not be that far apart this year. All right. This segment is off topic, so this is a little different than what we've had. And this is not necessarily related to something this week on the field, but something off the field. Harris, I will let you go first with your off-topic topic.
So my off-topic topic is Connor Stallions and Michigan scandal last year. If you were to talk to me, 3 hours ago, I would have told you that Connor Stallions. Well, I actually no. If you would have asked me 3 hours ago what I thought of Connor Stallions, I'd have told you he's a very sharp man, did a very bad thing to college football, and that Michigan deserves to be punished for what he did. But Connor Stallions is a very smart man. If you were to ask me right now, I'll tell you Connor Stallions is the smartest person to ever walk through a college football building, and he shouldn't be and he shouldn't be punished for anything. Because I'm watching this documentary. We got 24 minutes and 55 seconds to go, and it is so interesting. It's to the point where I believe Connor Stallions and everything he's saying. He's saying he never did advanced scouting. He wasn't on the Central Michigan sideline. And I've always thought that picture of him on the Central Michigan sideline was ridiculous, but he put it up right next to his face. It doesn't even look like him. Like, the guy's way skinnier in the face than Connor Stallions is. I feel like everyone wanted it to be Connor Stallions. So they put out, to the public that it was, but it just wasn't him. What he says about college football, and there's this underground thing where where there's all these guys underground that are stealing plays from one another, and it's not illegal to look on your TV and try and steal plays. This guy went to the Naval Academy, joined as a student coach, learned to steal signals from the other team, super smart up here, went to Michigan, lifelong Michigan fan, went there, got caught out in a scandal, and got kicked off the team. Pretty much Michigan made him look horrible. But at the end of the day, he still rep Michigan, still was a huge Michigan fan, did all this stuff with Dave Portnoy. I mean, it's this huge topic, scandal, whatever's going on. But when Connor Stallions is on this show talking about it, and he's like, I never did advanced scouting. I did everything by the book. And honestly, the only source this documentary has that really puts Connor Stallions to the, to the scandal is an Ohio State fan that won't even show his face from a message board. And he says that Connor Stallions bought tickets for other people to go to these Big Ten championship or Big Ten games or other college football games. But Connor Stallions' mom comes out and says, yeah, Connor's bought me a ticket to, go out to these games, or his friends, or, he flips tickets, so he'll give his friend a ticket. Or I think Connor Stallions was wrong place, wrong time, wrong thing doing. Yeah. Connor Stallions is super sharp.
Yeah, my opinion also changed on Connor Stallions, actually. You should watch this documentary if you haven't. It's out on Netflix right now. And the thing that surprised me the most, and Harris, I don't know if you got into this part yet, but it was the spreadsheet that he made with his own signals. As in, he would wear, I forget if it was a white shirt on a black background or a black shirt on a white background. He would have something different so to stand out, and he would take thousands of pictures of himself making different signals that he's seen around college football or that Michigan has or somebody else has. And then he would study those signals and try to catch them on the other sidelines, and he would mark them down, and then he would go over them. I don't know. My opinion changed on Connor Stallions. It really does seem like he was doing a lot of it by the book. Maybe there was some sketchy stuff, but nothing sketchier than what other teams were doing. There was that one Arkansas coach that was saying, like, this is what everybody does. Like, they have so many schools, nobody talks about them, have people that try to
steal
maybe
signs,
not
but
steal
no
the
one could
signs, or
do
at least
it.
memorize the sign. Right. Nobody could do it.
Dude,
Connor Stallions is a genius for what he was doing.
It's crazy. I can't wait to finish this thing when we get off here. But it's like crazy the fact like how they threw him under the bus and but like really in reality when you think about it, if he really wasn't going to the other games, he wasn't doing anything wrong. And by that point, the NCAA like did him wrong completely. Now he could have been on the Central Michigan sideline, but when he put that picture up next to him, he's like, this guy doesn't even look like me. He's right. The guy looked nothing like him. So it's like at some point I have to like really think, is Connor Stallions like really this evil man of college football that everyone's made him out to be? Or is he just a guy that was super smart and knew what he was doing and got caught at the wrong place at the wrong time, and a lot of things came back to him?
All right, we have less than 5 minutes until our hour wraps up. I want to talk about my off topic here. So week 0, Hawaii and Delaware State played 35-14. The game started at midnight Eastern time and ended around like 3. It was on like Spectrum Sports. So I wasn't watching, but I was keeping up with it just because it was like the only thing on, and I was like up at 3. And the interesting story about this game is not that Hawaii played Delaware State, is that Delaware State missed their flight. The whole team missed their flight to go to Hawaii. They play in Dover, Delaware, so they usually fly out of Baltimore or Philadelphia. And because they wanted a direct flight, they went up to JFK for a direct flight. It's a $5,000 flight, and they couldn't get to from Philly or Baltimore to Honolulu directly. So they went up to JFK in New York, and they got shuttle buses. Wirtz Motor Coaches, that is their school, and they had, quote, an internal scheduling malfunction, and that led into a delay of Delaware State getting picked up, and then the Hornets missed their scheduled flight out of JFK to Honolulu, and the whole team spent the night Tuesday night in a hotel in New York City to get more travel plans, and then they finally made it out Wednesday. So the Hawaii Athletic Department had to organize them with the practice schedule. The game didn't get pushed at all, but this was very interesting, and the Delaware State players were making some social media content about it, and they were keeping, the vibes light and everything. So it was just very interesting, and it's just funny that these stories with, there weren't many week 0 games last week, so there's not many stuff to pick out from, but I thought this was something that nobody really talked about, that I thought that caught my eye, that I saw when I was scrolling through on either TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, I don't remember, and I think this is interesting that Delaware State missed their flight, flew the next day to go play Hawaii. We have about 2.5 minutes. I want to end this on an hour. So I want to talk about one team that we didn't get to talk about yet, Harris, quickly. Colorado plays North Dakota State this week. Everyone loves talking about Colorado in college football. Is Colorado going to put it together, at least to some degree, Harris? Quickly.
6 wins. I'll give you 6 wins. That's my comment. 6 wins.
I think they can get 7, but I also think they can lose to North Dakota State this week. So I have no idea how it's going to go. And that game is Thursday night. So that game is today by the stream. If you're listening on the podcast after the show, it would be Thursday night. So North Dakota State, Colorado is definitely interesting there. I think let's just promote this show in our channels again. So I'm Michael Murphy from the Next Network. This stream is on my Twitch, on our Twitch channel, the Next Network. You can also find us on TikTok, the Next Network, and Instagram, the Next Network. And then the Play-by-Play Student Sports Network. This show is going to be on the Play-by-Play Student Sports Network YouTube, the Play-by-Play Student Sports Network Instagram, the Next Network Twitch, and then Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you can find your podcasts, hopefully, after the show ends. Harris, got about a minute left. Thank you. This has been very fun. Anything you want to say as we get the campus kickoff kicked off here?
Not really. I'm going to be in Tuscaloosa all weekend. I'm experiencing the vibe of college football, so I'm pretty pumped. I'm ready to get this show going next week after I go 3-0 and, in our little clash picks here, and we'll be back live next week to see the chat and everything. So I'm pretty pumped for, the next 2 weeks and how this is going to go.
Absolutely. We'll be back on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, starting next week, which will be week 2. I'm pumped for this game. Remember, on the Twitch, the next network, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, 7:30 on Saturday, and then 7:30 on Sunday. We have 7:30 on Sunday is LSU USC. For our producer, Zeke, shout out Zeke, the producer, and Harris Sideband. I am Michael Mursky. You have been listening to the very first edition of the Campus Kickoff here on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, and then afterwards on podcast. I'm Michael Mursky. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your night.
Again, brought to you by Play by Play Student Sports Network and the Next Network. This has been